The Get On Living Safely campaign is sponsoring this podcast to remind you to keep your spending in the community. Supporting local businesses keeps food on the table for our friends and neighbors. Follow them on social media and learn more at getonlivingsafely.com. Elizabeth Pearse is a musician who dabbles in everything from medieval to modern. A self-described multi-instrument experimenter, Elizabeth explores her musical past, traveling around the world, and her current vocal chamber music group. You can find more conversations on our website, lacrosselocal.com. I'm Amy.
And I'm Brent.
And this is Lacrosse Local.
My name is Liz Pearse. I was born in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and I guess I've been a musician all my life, either singing in church as a kid. My dad played piano when we were growing up just for fun, and so we always had a piano in the house, and I begged to take lessons before I could reach the keys. And so when I was a little bit older, I started taking piano lessons, and then an episode of Sesame Street led me to desperately wanting to play the clarinet as well, which happened a number of years later. So I started playing woodwind instruments. I went to Aquinas High School, so a smaller high school in La Crosse, and got the opportunity to play a lot of different instruments. I kind of did a lot of everything. I wanted to be a band teacher when I grow up, and that's what I started on as my major in college, and that didn't pan out. I realized that I am not gifted with working with children.
That's okay.
I'm also was not suited to being an orchestral player. Like, I was not going to be a clarinetist. I don't think my personality fits with that. So I'd started singing again, and singing really seemed to be where it was at for me.
Checking out some of your soloist work, you have going from orchestra to chamber. You kind of reference yourself as medieval to modern, as an explanation of your broad work. With that, what are some of your musical influences?
A lot of things. I love sounds, and one of the reasons I gravitated towards contemporary music is, unlike the sort of operatic style of the 17 through 1900s, and that's even in that span of time, there's so many different styles of singing, but the 20th century sort of brought this explosion of timbres and sounds and melodic directions that had nothing to do with, say, a major scale or something that would sound pretty. All of these other sounds, some that were abrasive, some that were loud or just unconventional in so many ways, it's so interesting to me. And I don't know, in terms of influences, like what I listen to music-wise, I listen to a lot of repetitive music, like techno and house music. It's not exactly what I perform unless you count some of the minimalist composers like Steve Reich or Morton Feldman. I love anything that tells a good story. So it's not maybe so much musical influences as poetic influences. And there's a world of wonderful storytelling to be done in music.
That makes so much sense just thinking about watching you perform on YouTube. Helmut Lachmann piece, it just seemed far out. It seemed like performance art in some capacity. What was like the process in tackling that work?
So Helmut Lachmann is I believe a German composer. He's still living. He's getting up there in years. He has this almost childlike wonder of, look at all the neat sounds one can make. And in Got Lost, this piece for voice and piano, he takes three different texts, actually. One is by a Portuguese poet, one is Nietzsche, a German poet, and another is a scrap of paper he found in an elevator where somebody is asking for their laundry basket back. And, Lachmann's music is in this very high art European context. but he literally is using somebody's like, I would very much like my laundry basket back, please, is some of the texts kind of hidden in this piece. And what he does, it's almost like he's torn up all the words, all the poetry, and collaged it back together. Meanwhile, he's using all of these sounds. The first couple minutes of the piece are just air sounds, pitched air sounds, like, which I don't know if you can hear over a recorded medium. And then later on, like, you know, the goofy sounds kids do because they think it's neat, like slapping your cheeks, kind of stuff, which it's so much fun. And then, you know, the pianist is also singing. The pianist is playing with, I think my pianist Stacy is using like a sippy cup, piece of plastic in the piano to make these kind of scratching noises along the strings. And she's slamming her hands on the piano, like fists on the piano at certain points. And there are these little jokes in the piece. Like, I think there's one section where I sing a pitch and then the pianist plays something just a half step away as if to correct me. But it's written into the score that it's supposed to be this clash. And it happens again and again. And it's like this joke that I'm not singing the right note for a good portion of the piece. But it's, yeah, so that piece, the score looks scary at first because most singers don't have to read multiple staffs at the same time. And I'm performing these different levels of speaking and singing and unpitched stuff. And the pianist has just 4 staves when they usually have 2. So she's doing everything all of the time. But it's so fun. It's just so much fun to perform.
Yeah, I mean, just watching it just seemed like it had so much going into it. It was really surprising and also refreshing. Something I also found out about you, you say that you're a multi-instrument experimenter. What does that mean? I mean, just watching you here kind of go off and hit your cheeks and stuff like that, what does that mean?
So it's, you know, usually in the classical music world, it's changing now, which I'm delighted about, but you go to school, if you go to a conservatory, you're sort of expected to specialize in an instrument. So for a while I've played only clarinet, and then I switched to only voice. But meanwhile, I was still playing low brass in the marching band in college. I was playing piano for all of my friends for accompanying with their voice lessons. And when I get the chance, I like being able to continue to play these instruments that I've had experience with all my life. I've started performing recitals or, you know, concerts where I'm accompanying myself at the piano, which outside of the classical music world is nothing special. There are tons and tons of performers, from Nina Simone and Alicia Keys to Elton John to Billy Joel, people who play piano and sing at the same time. In the classical music world, that hasn't been the case for about 100 years. It just sort of fell out of style as people were expected to be ever more virtuosic at one instrument, whether that be voice, piano, tuba, etc. I've been commissioning works, meaning I've been asking composer friends to write me pieces where I'm playing piano and singing at the same time. I haven't gotten brave enough to ask anybody to write me a piece for, say, voice and clarinet, one performer. It doesn't always work. But yeah, and you know, through this sort of artificial period of we all have to stay at home and work with ourselves more, I've seen more artists that are playing the piano while they're singing. I think the most recent Metropolitan Opera Gala, a couple performers did that and the whole world went nuts, at least the opera world went nuts. But it's becoming more common. I have other friends around who have picked up instruments they haven't touched in years because all of a sudden we don't have any gigs to practice for, so why not?
Just on another realm, you have your vocal chamber music group, and that's a Quince Ensemble, correct?
It's Quince Ensemble.
Quince Ensemble. You know, and you guys just had your, I believe, 4th album, Love Fail, released in April. How did that group come about?
Well, so 3 of us went to school together in Bowling Green, Ohio, about a decade ago. So we all met in 2010, and we started singing chamber music together, just, you know, small group, one at a part, treble voices. The women who founded it, Amanda DeBoer Bartlett and Kaylee Butcher, really just wanted to work in a group that was women, making all of the decisions for themselves, no conductor, no director, just them making music purely for fun. And they invited me to join them. And we really clicked. And then we started getting gigs and performing around Ohio and then New York. And it sort of built from there. We've performed all around the country. We've traveled to universities a lot, giving presentations on contemporary voice writing. We've commissioned a lot of work for ourselves because there's not a ton of music for treble singers written in the last 50 years. And we're sort of dedicated to performing music by mostly living composers. Most of the work we perform is by people we either know directly or secondhand. Like I could email 95% of the people we've performed and could get a response, which I love having that communication between the composer and the performer side.
Yeah, it's really interesting to learn about just the modern production and creation of music, where a lot of people think it's dated or it's just something that's hundreds of years old. It's really interesting to find that out. There's a lot of modern people writing this sort of music.
Yeah.
Based on your interest, you talked about traveling around the world. Is there a favorite place that you performed or any particular moment in a show that that struck you as just interesting or fun or exciting?
Some of my favorite experiences haven't had anything to do with like where I was so much as the conversations I would have with some of the audience members after the show. And I remember there's one piece specifically that always has the most interesting audience reactions. And it's this Morton Feldman work that Kaylee, Amanda, and I performed called Three Voices, which was originally written for one person by Morton Feldman. And he wrote it for performer Joan LaBarbera to sing with recorded versions of herself. So she's singing along with herself. And the piece is very polarizing. Every time we perform it, it's minimalist, it's kind of dissonant, very quiet. The text is extremely sparse. I think most of the text is, who'd have thought that snow falls, when we're even singing words. And it's an hour of this very minimal, slow shifting music. About 10 minutes in, one row of people always stands up and leaves. Like, they just can't handle it. It's not cool for them. They're not okay. So they just get up and go. And every time we perform it, an equal number of people come up afterwards and just say, like, I didn't know what to expect. I had no idea what was going on. My perception of time, I feel like I'm on drugs. Everything's changed now. And they have these mind-blowing experiences interacting with this music for the first time. And I just have, it's this weird memory to know that like some people hate it so much that they can't deal with it for 5 minutes and then they leave. And then some other people, like now they're Feldman acolytes and they go seek out his music everywhere else.
I mean, there seems to be a real connection to, comedy with some of these performances. To me, that's almost like Andy Kaufman-esque in terms of trying to get a majority of your audience to just take off.
Yeah, I mean, so there are composers who are more overtly trying to make that happen. It's maybe the music of Johannes Kreidler does that sometimes, where it's really, really polarizing or abrasive, or the directions in the score say this piece is not over until audience members get up and leave. So it's sort of an endurance of how long will people deal with whatever nonsense is happening on stage before they call it. With the Feldman, it's more like, it's almost like a massage for your brain. Some of it kind of hurts or feels uncomfortable or new when you're in the midst of it. And then afterwards, there's this glow of, oh, that was interesting. I'm glad I've gone through that experience. Or my shoulder doesn't hurt as much anymore. I'm not sure.
You also have some community support and kind of some activism going on. I saw you're part of Beyond Artists. Can you tell us about that a little bit?
Yeah, I recently ran across it. It seems to be more a group of East Coast and Boston-based artists, as far as I can tell. And there's another one based in La Crosse, or at one time based in La Crosse, singer, also multi-instrumentalist Sarah Braley, who is a member of a Boston-based vocal ensemble. It's just a group of artists that pledge a portion of their revenue as artists, their portion of the gigs we get for the year, we donate to just causes. I've donated to some music festivals that I truly believe in, like Omaha Under the Radar in Omaha. Their programming has consistently been just fantastic. They pay their artists, they pay them fairly, and they also bring in an amazingly diverse group. Everyone has sort of their different causes. I'm still looking for one. I'd love to be able to donate better to organizations providing instruments to students in need. My very first clarinet when I was in high school, one of my math teachers asked me if I knew anyone who had a clarinet that they could give away or lend, because she had a cousin that needed an instrument and her family couldn't afford one. And I had just gotten my wooden clarinet, so a professional instrument, but the clarinet I learned to play on, I lent to her, and it felt really good to know that somebody else gets the chance to become a musician in the way they want to because I helped.
That's great. So what's next for you right now? I'm sure as any musician, COVID has affected you. Have you been using this process to create anything, or what's next?
With Quince, we've sort of started working on distance residencies. We've now done 2 with Boston Conservatory, Berkeley, and the Vermont College of the Fine Arts. We've done these performances where we either recorded everything in our homes on our own, or we recorded in a small group in a studio up in Minneapolis after quarantining together for a while. And we've been very, very careful. But we've been recording remotely for these projects. We released a piece that is part of a collaboration with composer Courtney Bryan and members of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. We recorded that from our homes, put it together, tracked it, and released that with the CSO on their social media back in, I believe, June. For me, otherwise, I've been working on more self-accompanied rep, more jazz-influenced voice and piano work, and I've done one recital or one concert from my house back on my birthday in May, which was so much fun. I streamed it on Twitch, which I know is a gamer platform, but a lot of musicians have been using it to stream live performances from their homes. And, I had a chat window open. I could interact with the folks that had shown up, which was kind of wonderful because it's people who would never be in a room together otherwise. Some of my students from up in Winona, my parents, my sister up in Stevens Point, a friend from Champaign, Illinois, who I haven't seen in years. Just all of these people in a virtual room together, and I had the great joy of getting to perform for them.
So if people want to find out more about you, follow along, maybe find out more about the ensemble, where's the best spot for them to head?
My website is lizpearse.com, and Quince Ensembles is quince-ensemble.com.
Lacrosse Local Podcast is a production of River Travel Media. Do you have an interview idea you would like to share with us? Message us on Facebook at Lacrosse Locals. Subscribe to the Lacrosse Local Podcast on your favorite podcast app. If you like us, rate us 5 stars. We thank you for it.